Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Paul Revelia back on the show. It's been a little while, but we're going to be talking a lot about coaching. If you don't know Paul, he is a world-class physique coach. He is also a men's physique competitor and a high-level one at that, and he owns a coaching company as well. He himself, though, specializes on taking people to stage and making them their absolute best. And I thought he was a great person to talk to in terms of what is actually good coaching. What does good coaching look like? I think there's a lot of things that go on within the industry, even things I found out today that I didn't realize happen with kind of quote unquote bad coaches. And we talk about good coaching practice. So as a client looking in, what does good coaching actually look like? Maybe your coach does this, maybe they don't, or maybe you should look out for this for your coach or prospective coach. And similarly, if you are a coach, maybe you need to up your game, or maybe you're doing a lot of the things that we discuss during this podcast that goes everywhere from what are coaching green flags, red flags, and then even digging into taking judges' feedback as a coach, how valuable or invaluable that is. Lots of nuggets of wisdom here today shown through Paul, and I would be remiss without reminding you that at Revive Stronger, we're an online coaching company, and I think we're pretty damn good at what we do. We take people to stage, and a huge key thing that we do during that is communication. It's so key to us. We don't have hundreds of clients, don't even have tens of clients who are taking the stage, so that we can really give dedicated attention to every single person, answer questions, make sure they absolutely understand how to execute, help calm them down, whatever needs to happen, we are there and able to communicate. We have an online consultation initially, so we have a chat face-to-face, so that can happen. And then we have weekly check-ins where you can also communicate via video and we give video feedback. So that communication piece is just so key, and we have systems and setups that allow us to get the most out of our clients. So if you are interested in learning more about that, it's always linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's get into the chat with Paul. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I can't quite believe it's been 3 years since our last recording. It was episode 284. We're now closing in on episode 500. And I was just saying how I think the time has flown because I've still been getting my dose of Paul through your YouTube channel, your Instagram account, but also your Pro Physique Studio podcast. So if people today haven't listened to that, I highly recommend it. And you last were on, we were talking about specific female challenges within prep, refeeds, diet breaks, peak week strategy, show day strategy. And
100%.
When I think about coaches that really know what they're doing and have a very client-centered approach, I think of you. And that becomes very obvious when I hear you speak about your coaching and through your podcast in it specifically. So first of all, my first question would be for you, Paul. How long have you been coaching?
You know, it's really cool. This is actually the 15th anniversary of me starting my prep business. Well, coaching business. It turned into a prep for me, but I still have 20 coaches. We don't just coach competitors, but so 15 years of coaching. Yeah.
That's awesome. So pretty much everyone on your roster is a competitor nowadays?
No.
Okay.
My roster personally, me, yes.
Yeah.
The Pro Physique business model, no. Obviously, competitors are a very specific breed. They want a very specific type of coach. But, you know how many people reach out and they say, I want to look like a competitor, but I just want to. That's where I go, hey, this coach would be perfect for you. They understand your lifestyle or your demands.
Nice. So, one of your Instagram posts inspired this, and I'd just initially be really interested here. I don't know if one specifically comes to mind, but like a prep horror story, because like I was just saying, like you're a great coach, and I think you probably take on clients who have been through the ringer.
Yeah.
What are some of the worst things you've heard happen?
Yeah, so, you got to be careful when you call somebody a great coach, because I think there's a lot of coaches that are really good at their job, but they're maybe just not a great fit for the person. There are so many different needs of a client. And so I have a very specific, clientele that I like to focus on. I'm not heavy-handed with drugs. I don't mind if someone, wants to look down that avenue, but I'm not heavy-handed. I'm very light with that stuff. And so there are clients that I'm not a good fit for because they want to be very aggressive with that side of the sport. But I think when I think of coaching, I think of like, okay, who are you? What is your goal? And do we align on that? That is where I think I shine. Like I am great at getting people to their goal. I've had hundreds of pro cards and, 8 Olympians and, all those things. But some of my greatest successes are the girl that got third in novice bikini, but she lost 80 pounds in the process and no longer has an eating disorder. So, like, that's not as sexy as social media would make it be. The problem I have is there are coaches who take someone, don't care who they are, where they're at. They see them as a chance to build their ego and their reputation. And they tell them, this is how it's done. You got to do these drugs. You got to do no carbs. You got to do hours of cardio. You don't get recovery days. If you go off plan, you're a terrible person and you're not meant for this sport. And that's where I have a problem, because those type of coaches, they don't talk about all the people that they've driven out of the sport forever, or all the people they've put in the hospital, or all the people that they've, created, eating disorder behaviors or ruined bodybuilding for. They only talk about the client that this month got on stage and got their pro card. And you see these coaches have a ton of turnover and always seem to be focusing on the new shiny thing. So like a lot of my horror stories are getting people from these coaches that will even get praise online. Their clients will praise them. And then when I ask this person, like, why did you make so many positive posts? They'll say, oh, well, my coach used to write my posts. And I'll be like,
Wow.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And, everybody listening knows people like this. So when it comes to like horror stories for me, the one that I just probably made a post about, or I don't even know if I made a post about it yet, was I got a girl who was not really interested in drugs, talented competitor, great muscle, great shape, didn't need a whole lot. And when she sent me her peak week plan, she had gone from looking like she was ready to turn pro to looking like she shouldn't even be on stage. And I said, well, send me what you did. And it was a list of 7 drugs that I had to look up 3 of them because
Gosh.
they were anti-estrogen, diuretics, with anabolics. So like just a hodgepodge of stuff that even in my experience, I was like, what are these substances? And, I actually had this young lady, I pulled her off everything she was on. We just got back to getting good sleep, training hard, macro ratios that made sense. She's literally dropped multiple pounds of body fat, looks days better. We're going to compete later in the year. So we're spending this time. I'm kind of just, and I don't think there's a lot of coaches that actually allow an athlete to be the best version of themselves before they just start throwing the kitchen sink at them. And by then, sometimes it's too late. Like these athletes now associate prep with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had no idea actually that people like clients had their coaches writing for them, or I can imagine maybe they get discounted coaching and like there could be various incentives for that client to like
Well,
praise
there's
their
some
coach.
coaches have contracts, right? And so, like, I don't do contracts. Like, if you want to be my client, great. If you don't, great. I'm not. So it's odd to me to think like, okay, here's a contract. You sign up. Now you're stuck with me, even if I do a shit job. So that's always been odd to me.
Yeah, we actually have a contract, but it's not that it doesn't like lock
Doesn't
someone
lock people.
in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like
more of a
we have an
data
agreement. I'll say
protection.
this: we have an agreement. I send documents saying like, this is your role, this is my role.
Yeah,
But at no point do I say, no matter what happens, you owe me this money.
yeah, yeah. That's scary, and I guess yeah, it locks people in. And like you said, I think of you can only sell shit once is what I kind of think of as a phrase. But these coaches they
100%.
burn through so many
100%.
clients, so I guess there's somehow the ones surviving and getting rewarded for that and doing well enough just have the genetics or wherewithal
100%.
to do well, and so these coaches are able to survive still in this day and
It's
age
it's
of
one
social
thing that
media.
it's one thing that doesn't get discussed enough when it comes to coaching is great athletes make coaches look great.
Yes.
It's just like in sports, like college football or whatever sports popular. You you're only going to be as good a coach as the talent you have. Now you can pull the most out of an athlete, but not every athlete has the ability to turn pro, go to the Olympia, win a pro card, whatever that is. So like what you'll notice is oftentimes coaches will have a few, you want to call them like, keystone clients that kind of draw a lot of people to them. But if they don't have a lot of backing behind that, one of my like claims to fame is all my athletes that have gone to the Olympia, I got them to their first Olympia. For me, that's like, okay, I'm not at the Olympia trying to pick up girls and go, yeah, you're my client now. No, I'm helping people reach their goals. I'm not picking them off once they're there to say, look what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar to people looking towards advice from someone who has like freaky arms. And it's like, well, maybe they were just
Yeah.
like, there's a genetic proclivity for them to just have
Yeah.
freaky arms, and just no matter what they did. Is the same way
It's
people going
almost the
to
worst
coaches.
person because
Exactly.
they don't have to work for that. They just go do a couple sets of arms and you're like, yeah, I want that arm program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same way with clients where, I mean, if they have a dramatic transformation, like a before and after, like the best coaches are the ones who can take like kind of subpar or intermediate, well, basically make a client be their best, take them to ultimate
Yeah.
best. But sometimes those don't look as impressive as just someone who's just that elite individual. So they
Yeah.
go towards that coach, and that's not the ideal thing to do. One person who comes to mind is Brian DaCosta, who obviously you coached, and
Yeah.
he's been on the podcast. We talked through everything there, and yes, he was obviously genetically elite, but you took him from being competitive and doing really well, which he would always do, I think,
Yep.
to
Yep.
winning worlds.
Yep. He was an interesting case because he was someone with so much talent. When I first started coaching him, he was very laid back about the process. And I kept telling him, I said, when you go to the world championships, that's when the first time you're going to realize what your sport is. Because every time we would go to an amateur show, he was just like dominant, like it wasn't close. And we were backstage at the Yorton Cup like 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. And I remember I was like, I can't wait for him to see Kurt because you don't understand natural bodybuilding till you see someone who's been dedicating 30 years of their life to a sport. And we were literally lined up and he was standing next to Kurt. And I said, yeah, he just was looking at me like, well, how does he look like that? I said, yeah, he's basically less genetically gifted than you, but he's been prepping for this show for 20 years. You've been
Yeah.
prepping for it for 12 weeks.
What's Kurt's last name again?
Um, he's a core athlete. Kurt Widener.
Widener. I thought it was Widener. I just didn't want to say it, just in case I got it wrong.
Yeah.
I've heard of Kurt. I follow Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, there was other guys too that day that looked incredible. You know, Kurt didn't even win. It was Magnus that won. But what's funny is when they came out in the pro at the Yorton, they put Ryan right in the middle at first. The first thing they did was put him in the middle. But then when they started posing him, he got softer. He couldn't hold his poses. He wasn't as conditioned from the back. He got kicked out. So he took that time off and took it to heart. The great thing about bodybuilding is that it's gonna kick you in the nuts, and then you decide, oh, do I really want to be good at this? And Brian said, oh, I want to be good at this. And he took the next 2 years. And when he came back to me, when he sent his first update pictures and said, hey, I'm ready to prep again, I was like, what have you been doing? His shoulders were wider, his back was thicker, his quads were bigger, to the point where his waist looked smaller because he's not a small waisted human.
No.
And I said, if you're not a world champion this year, we're wasting your time. And he said, let's go. That's what I wanted to hear. Let's go. And he did the work. He let me push him harder than we ever pushed him before. He practiced his posing for hours. And to be fair, he needed every ounce of it because the two guys that he beat from Germany were actually a little bit leaner, but Brian was so lean that his size overwhelmed. And when I talked to the head judge after the show, I said, what was the difference? He said, Brian was in the heavyweights at 5'9", 200 pounds, 195. The middleweight was 5'9", 165. Like, that just tells you how dense and wide Brian is.
Yeah.
And so he's like, listen, those guys were really hard, but it's a bodybuilding competition. And so Brian was lean enough. He had striated glutes. He had the split hamstrings. So, be worried next time Brian competes because he's that guy that's like, I don't want to compete next year. I want to compete in a couple of years when I can be better. I'm like, damn, dude, he's Doug Miller-esque, whereas like the genetics meets the lifestyle. That's just who he is, and it's going to be epic next time he competes.
Yeah, and it just goes to show what it takes to be world class. Like, yes, you have to have elite genetics, but you have to have the elite process to be top of the game. You can't have one or the other and be there, unfortunately.
And I don't think a lot of people don't take the time in between shows. Prep is grueling, and then coming out of prep can be tough. And so if you're doing a show every 12, 18 months, you're not really growing. The top natural bodybuilders, they spend 2-3 years between shows. And then once they get their physique to where they want it, then they can compete every year because they're just, like Brian Whitaker was just fine tuning, in his career. But like to get to that level, you can't compete every year. You got to give yourself time. And that can be the hard part. If you're not dedicated like you're in prep, when you're not in prep, you're not going to make as much progress.
So well said. Just to bring it back to coaches and kind of looking out for things, is there anything you think are like red flags that are easy to identify or spot if like a person is looking for a coach, anything you'd be like, this is
Yeah,
something
you
to
have
look
to
out
make
for?
sure you're not more invested than the coach is. I think spotting a good coach is easy. Um, look out for people that kind of highlight one or two clients or three clients. Look for coaches that actually want to talk to you on the phone. I think that's a big one. I always speak to my clients on the phone. I want to make sure we're aligned, that we're a good fit. Um, you know, yeah, I don't know. I think there a lot can be gained from a conversation, and reach out to their other clients, not just their top clients, because remember, they're likely paying them. This was something that I learned along the way too, was a lot of these well-known competitors are getting a salary from their coach. So they're actually being ghost coached by their husbands,
That's
boyfriends,
wild.
friends, and they're getting a salary from their head coach to say, I'm your coach. This was eye-opening to me as well. And so I've never done that. I've had athletes that I've taken all the way to the Olympia that I no longer charge, and I'll help them out with, show fees from time to time. But I love coaching. I don't love the attention from coaching. I don't want my presence to overshadow my athletes, which is hard at this point because I've been doing this a long time. People know who I am, but the show's about my client, not about me.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And I really like the kind of flipping on its head and like look for the green flags, look at the coaches who are clearly deeply invested in their clients. And I
Who's
think the
talking
tip of,
about the process? Who's talking about
yeah,
information? Who's sharing that stuff? Not just before and afters, but like who's actually giving back?
are there any coaching mistakes you feel like maybe you made early that you wish you could rectify in hindsight? Is there anything that
Yeah.
comes to mind?
Oh, and I'm still, this is, I'm not sitting here on the pedestal saying like, oh, I do it the right way. I'm always looking for opportunity to improve. Technology has been a huge benefit. The biggest mistakes I made early on when I started coaching was my first coach was very hands off with me. It was an email and interaction. So when I started coaching, he told me, never let your clients get close to you.
Wow.
They will ask too much of you. Um, and so that's how I approached it at first. I was very quick on my email, but very slow to a phone call. I've reversed that. Now I do a phone call before I sign up with somebody, and I send a video to my clients every week, and my call calendar is always available to them, and my phone number. And what I found was by over indexing on that part of it, I got less emails. I got less phone calls. It's funny how like you really let them know you're there for them. And anytime they have a question, you address it, and you kind of just go right after any problems they're having, and they're good. They're confident. They know what they're doing. So yeah, I think early on as a coach, I thought, oh, I'm an internet coach. Let's just keep this separate. No, this is what I do. These are my people. They become my friends, my family. Everybody has a different level of need with like how much attention they get. Some people love the just tell me what to do and leave me alone. Some people love I just need to know that if I text you, I get a reply, that kind of thing.
I think that's so well said. I was similar to you. I started with email check-ins, and it just became so clear to me that so much was getting lost in translation. I wasn't able to
Yeah.
explain myself. They couldn't explain themselves. So now I've moved to a video check-in format too, and I always have a consultation with clients before signing up as well, because I almost feel like I wouldn't want to take someone's money before I've been able to talk through the actual process of what it's going to take. And you get to kind of screen them in that process too, right? I guess
Yeah. And
there's some
you just
things
feel
that,
better from the beginning. You know them and they know you. And it's like you understand their vision for their goals. So when you get their check-in, you're like, oh, okay, let's see where we're at this week. Oh, how exciting. We're making progress versus like it just being like an app or like I actually, it's funny. So I sent an email to a client emailed me. I was at a show and I was just sitting there watching the show. So I opened up my email and she said, hey coach, I'm really struggling with hunger today. So I replied to her. I said, okay, is there anything I can help with? Have you tried taking a walk or drinking a diet soda? Right. She texted me and goes, hey coach, is your email AI or is that you? I was like, well, what? I don't know what do you mean AI? She's like, the response didn't sound like you. And I read it back and I was like, oh yeah, it's very like black and white. How can I help you today? Have you tried taking a walk? And so it seemed, and I was like, no, I literally called her and said, no, this is me typing, but I'm at a show. And she's like, oh, I didn't realize it was Saturday. So there can be some, misunderstandings from people because if she goes down that rabbit hole and she starts thinking now it's AI, right? Like, I guess that's a real thing that's happening. So I try to over index on the contact.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, that's so important. It reminds me, I was someone inquired about coaching, and I got back to them in the messenger on Instagram, and we had like a bit of back and forth. And they at some point they were just like, "Sure, sure, whatever, AI, Steve." And I was like, "Hey, like this is me responding to each
Oh,
of
I get
these."
that all the time on Instagram. I got a comment on my YouTube once. It was like, because Instagram or YouTube has a nice like a studio app, so you can go in and just you can reply to comments in real time. Doesn't matter when the video was posted. If it's a 15-year-old video and they comment, I'll reply to that.
Yeah,
And so someone commented, "Don't ask Paul questions. He never replies." So I literally was like, I literally probably reply 100 times a day to YouTube comments. How can I help you? And the guy was like, "Holy shit, I thought that was a bot." I'm like, okay, but no, like this is me, like So you have to sometimes overcome people's perceptions and fears that they're just dealing with. And I think maybe that's an advantage in the future because real personal connection is what's going to be lost with this world of like there might be soon a simulation where it looks like me, sounds like me, says what I would say. There's going to be something lost in that. But when you meet somebody in person, that's always going to be real.
yeah, yeah. I think that's very well said. I think I kind of hope with AI and with apps coming out, it does get rid of the poor quality coaches that are out there. I think it's been a bit slow to happen, to be honest, but you'd think that they would fade out eventually.
Yeah, I don't know. At this point, I thought that would have happened a decade ago when Lane
Yeah,
was putting out all that information and, Eric Helms, and I felt like there was this big movement. Now there's been a movement away from that. Nobody's now getting educated. Now it's, who has the best abs and, you know, so yeah, I think quality coaching is always going to be where people end up, but I think they're
yeah.
always going to start with low level coaching.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I don't know why that happens either, but I guess it's kind of there must be some sort of human nature aspect to it where they're just
It's always
attracted
the
to
lens
this.
at which you first find the sport. Like your first coach is going to be, if you're in the gym, you're going to see someone that looks good and be like, who's that? If you're on Instagram, you're going to see somebody that looks good and who's that? And click on their profile. So it's where you start. And then what happens is you have a bad experience and you go on the internet and search, I've had a bad experience. Who are the actual good coaches? And then I always tell people I'm their second coach, almost always their second coach. I've been fortunate to be some people's first coaches where they've never had issues with health or well-being and stuff like that. But unfortunately, it's, not everyone finds the right coach right away.
For sure. Paul, out of interest, are there any times of which people come and they have a consultation with you and it's clear they're not ready to prep? Are there any signs that you're looking for in that
Yeah.
chat where you're like, you're going to have to be clear with them?
I mean,
This
that's
year
the
is not the year.
advantage. That's the advantage of doing something for 15 years is like, I no longer tell people what they want to hear. I tell people the truth. And, I've had people come to me that are like, hey, I have a show in 12 weeks. My coach isn't doing a good job. And I'm like, cool, let me see what's going on here. Okay, here's your calories, here's your cardio. This is how far much I said, no, you can't do a show in 12 weeks. You just did a show 12 weeks before that and you gained 15 pounds. You can't do a show until next year. And sometimes they're like, oh, thank God. My coach was just telling me to eat lettuce and be sad. And
Wow.
you're telling me the truth. And I'm like, well, it does me no good to sign you up for the next 12 weeks, have you look halfway decent, and then just quit the sport. Like, bodybuilding isn't a short-term goal. It's a long-term lifetime process. And if you do it right one time, you'll be set for life. If you do it wrong one time, you'll be undoing that for years.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And I hate to think of coaches being desperate and putting clients through things they know they shouldn't be going through just for the sake of having someone on their roster, having that money, or having that
I
transformation.
don't know. I don't know if it's always, you try to think like, oh, good guys versus bad guys. And like, I just don't know that they understand well enough. They believe like, oh, we can get them ready.
Almost coming from a place of they don't want to let someone down or they want to help everyone they can, and they just don't have that understanding that, hey, like there's times of which you need to call people out on their goals and
Yeah.
ambitions if they don't actually align well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it. Coaching is like I've tried it. I probably had somebody reach out to me 8 weeks out from a show that was on 800 calories and 2 hours of cardio and had 15 pounds lose. And I thought, okay, I'm going to institute some refeeds. I'm going to help them with their cortisol. I'm going to get them, I'm going to get their bodies responding. And I might have even made a little progress with them, but it still wasn't the result that they were after. And that's my job. So I didn't set the right expectation based on what I understood, which was you can't lose 20 pounds when you're already below 10 times your body weight in calories and doing 2 hours of cardio. You're just not going to get there. The body has a memory for fat loss that if you don't reset it, you just keep getting stuck in that wheel.
Yeah, and you see, it's like you said with the people who try and compete year after year, and eventually they just end up getting worse and worse and burnt by the sport. So they're very
Well, and
fortunate to come to someone like yourself who actually give them
I
an
made a
educated
reel, and
response.
maybe that's the reel you're referring to. I made a reel. It was a reaction reel of a girl that was like, it was a very trendy thing on Instagram for a while there. People would be like, little does she know that this was the bite that would send her in a spiral, have an eating disorder, all because of bodybuilding. And I made a reel about it, and I, was, nice about her. I wasn't like mean, but I was just like, basically, bodybuilding was not the problem.
Yeah,
The approach to bodybuilding was the problem. I've got competitors on the Olympia stage that are eating a burger the night before the show. They don't have eating disorder behaviors, and they are competing at the highest level of the sport. It's not bodybuilding. Yes, you can have a bad approach that will fucking ruin your relationship with food and body dysmorphia and all that stuff, but it wasn't the sport, it was the approach.
I'm still shocked the fact that cheat meals are still so popular. Like I will have clients who are like, "So Steve, when am I getting a cheat meal?" I'm like, I've never talked about cheat meals. We follow a flexible dieting approach. This is not. We might do a refeed, but even then, I'm not going to recommend you go kind of hog wild
Yeah,
with anything. It's
yeah,
very unfortunate. I think bodybuilders are attracted to. Well, I know I am as well. Like black and white, very much extreme one direction, then extreme the other direction.
yeah.
And it's great that you're taking so many people to stage with a flexible dieting approach, more of that kind of dimmer switch of never being fully off or on in one
Yeah, I
extreme.
mean, don't get me wrong. Even once I get closer to stage, I lock in like a psychopath. I mean, I think we all have to turn that switch, whether it's 8 weeks out, 6 weeks out, 12 weeks out, whatever it is. You can't just be, eating out 3 times a day. And that's not the approach. But what I mean is when you tell somebody they can't have something or they're not allowed to eat something or calories and fats and carbs get too low, this is where we start to run into problems. But yeah, every good competitor at some point, the funnel gets so narrow that they're eating the same 7 or 8 foods and getting to bed on time and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's inevitable that you have to get there. I
Yeah.
think it gets more and more restrictive and less flexible the closer you get. But the off season is in that way, the startup prep is in that way, and you just kind of refine it as you get closer and closer. And it's exactly as you said, it's that mindset of I know I can have that, but I'm choosing not to because I'm going to be damn hungry if I eat that. It's going to make me want to overeat. It's not aligned with my goals and
Yeah.
what I'm trying to achieve right now. So
Yeah.
they kind of have that mindset versus and that gives them self-efficacy versus no, coach said I can't eat
100%.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I call it a funnel, because I think at the beginning of a prep or a fat loss phase, you're more inclusive of things. But as you get leaner and as you get closer to stage or your goal, it's going to narrow your focus. You're going to cut out extracurriculars. You're going to really just go down to the foods that digest well. I mean, I get so crazy at the end of prep because I don't want to eat something that might make the scale fluctuate because it's got different sodium or digest differently. I want the predictability because that creates the consistency on the scale in the mirror, and it's very predictable. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's where that really helps.
Yeah, I know one of the symptoms of like relative energy deficiency, if I can speak, is poorer digestion and digestive health. Like, and I
Yeah.
can know I get bloated from the like smallest change in my diet, and I absolutely hate that at the end of prep. And
Yeah.
so I completely agree with you. Like, it could throw off a training session and, and bits and pieces like that. Is there anything you see with your competitors when they do get in that late end of prep where you're like, that is too kind of weird, funky, restrictive? I don't know. Something that comes to mind. I don't know. I saw someone doing like cucumber with sweetener on it. Is there stuff like that where you're
Um,
like, oh, I'm not sure about that?
yeah, I mean, the gum, having more coffees, because what tends to happen is like if you have an extra coffee and you put a little creamer in it and it satisfies that sweet tooth, and then now you're having 4 coffees, a little creamer. Now there's another 60, 80 calories. Like, little things like that can get out of hand. And before you know it, and you're not even reporting things to your coach because you're just like, well, I'm not doing anything different. Um, yeah. So definitely sometimes, when people are struggling, I'll pull back the layers and be like, send me everything you put in your mouth for 24 hours. And I'll be like, what's this? Oh, that's got like G butter or some of these companies that make like low calorie foods. I say, oh, you're having this every day. Let's just pull that out. And immediately they drop weight. And I'm like, yeah, the calories on there are probably lying.
Hmm.
There's a lot of these companies, so like you just recognize things after years of doing this. Like nothing, like the most surefire way to make sure you're on your plan, prep your own food, weigh your own food, eat your own food, do that for a couple days. No one's ever not lost weight doing that.
Yeah, yeah, that's so well said. Something I would be interested to know for you, Paul, is, and this is talking about obviously the way you communicate with your clients. I think you'll probably have a really good understanding of this. How do you differentiate between someone who's kind of being soft and needs a bit of a kick up the arse versus someone who's truly like mentally struggling?
Phone call. You got to get on the phone with them. So my favorite thing to do with a competitor that's like, so my check-in process includes wellness scores, I call them. So I ask them about their sleep. I ask them about their, stress, hunger signals, training intensity, adherence to the plan. So if I notice their adherence is a 10, like they're killing it, but their energy is dropping, their digestion is dropping, their stress is higher, I'm like, hey, what's going on? Oh, is it prep related or is it life related? Because you can't separate those two.
Yeah,
You can't be like, oh, I'm on my plan perfectly, but I'm going through a really bad breakup, or I lost my job, or I'm moving, or I'm getting married, or any of these things that have outside stressors on you, or one of my kids is sick. Like, as a dad, like, you just realize like prep, you don't get to prep in a bubble. None of us do. So that's when I get on the phone with them. And sometimes I get on the phone, they're like, hey, coach, everything's great. Yeah, no. I'm like, oh, okay. You actually have good energy. So something else. So we actually do just need to change the plan. But if I hear them and they're kind of downtrodden, I'm like, okay, we need to take the pressure off for a couple days or a week. Let's pull back a little bit, and see if we can't just reset you. And you'd be amazing how when you pull back, it just freaking slingshots people forward. Just give them that
yeah.
little bit of recovery, and bang, they're like, I don't know what's happening. I'm dropping weight even with more food and less cardio. And I'm like, yeah, because you're actually, your body's happy, your hormones are happy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that phone call, something, we don't do a phone call, but we get a video check-in from our clients. So similar to like how 3DMJ might do it. And you can just tell by how someone's speaking to things. It
100%.
gives you context behind the numbers. Whereas,
Yeah.
if a coach is just relying on data entry on an app and they have no form of communication outside of emails, someone can say they're fine, but you can, if you see someone say, yeah, I'm fine, versus like, yeah, I'm fine, you kind of
Yeah.
know how fine they truly are.
Very true. Very true.
In a case where maybe you have a client who is course correcting, maybe they're a little bit behind schedule, do you have any ways of getting them not to panic and just like give them confidence in the way that you communicate? I guess it comes through those check-ins again, where you can really talk it through.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about having a history of coaching is that I can explain things based on my past experience. I never try to compare two clients to each other, but I can obviously say like, hey, I've been in this situation before. Here's what's going to happen, and here's what has happened in the past, and that can give them some confidence. The thing about competitors that's great is like there's nothing they won't do to reach their goal. The problem is there's nothing they won't do to reach their goal. So like you kind of have to, I've had clients check in after a couple of weeks and I'll be like, man, you're really, nothing's happening. I'm like, does the scale change on your refeed days? And they'll be like, oh, I'm not taking them because I haven't been dropping. And I'll be like, well, that they're not a reward. They're what keeps the scale dropping. Well, I don't understand. Well, you don't have to understand. I'm your coach. Ask a question before you change the plan. And so, that's where I'll have a tough love conversation. I'll be like, hey, if you don't want to do what I want you to do, great, go coach yourself. But if I'm giving you a plan and you're not following it, and then I don't understand why things aren't progressing, then we got a problem. And then, okay, I'll take the refeed days. Oh, coach, I dropped weight on my refeed days. I don't understand. I go, you don't have to understand. This is 15 years of experience. You're not paying me to babysit you. You're paying me because I'm fucking good at my job and I've gotten the result that you're after, but you're not trusting me. So then we have to have a conversation like, is this the right fit? And usually it works out, but there's sometimes it's like, no, I just want to go my own way and do my own. Okay, great. I don't want you on stage with a product that I had no hand in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you identified a really key feature of what makes like great coaching is the ability for the coach to ask the client questions. If you have
Yeah.
too many clients, you won't ask questions because you have no time to receive that and have actual like dynamic conversation with them. But there are a number of times I've asked questions where I'm
Yeah.
confused about something going on, and then they give me an answer just like you mentioned. And it's like, oh, this is why. And then you reinforce what we're doing, why we're doing it. But you
Yeah.
do have to build that trust because
Yeah.
someone hired you for a reason, right? You don't want to just confirm that they're doing everything right.
No, 100%. And it's what's funny about this coaching job is, I've been doing it for 15 years now, but I haven't had any clients for 15 years. I've had some for like 8 or 10, but there's also a natural turnover to this. A lot of people come into bodybuilding and then they a year or two and then they're out. They want to go be a professional cyclist or they play more tennis. Like bodybuilding is a phase for a lot of people. So as a coach, you can't get burnt out from teaching. I've heard Lane say many times, and this is why like I love Lane, but I don't think he's a great coach as far as like the interpersonal relationship of coaching. Is that I made a video about that 10 years ago. I'd be like, Lane, if it's 3 days old, no one's fucking seen it, dude. So like if you get tired of telling your clients the same thing over and over, don't be a coach. If you get tired of someone saying like, hey, what is creatine? Don't be a coach. I love discussing that stuff. So this, someone checks in and they got a list of questions and one of them is like, why do we do steady state and high intensity? I'm like, all right, here we go. I know this answer, and so you can never be, if you're a coach, you can never get tired of teaching. That is your job.
Yeah.
And honestly, like some of my clients that I've had for 7 or 8 years, they just stay with me because we have a good rapport. They even tell me, I know what you're going to do and I know what you're going to say. I'm like, yeah, you probably don't need me at this point. They're like, no, I don't need you. But now it's a different type of coaching. Now we're talking about strategy. We're talking about maybe they're a coach and I'm helping them with their processes.
Yeah.
So like the relationship changes when you've been working with somebody for a while. They just learn what you're going to do.
Yeah. It's very much like you're the guide, the mentor, almost in the corner to kind of, and also the better they understand the reasons behind something, the more they're going to be able to execute it. Because they're like, hey,
I say that all the time.
Exactly.
When you understand what's happening, you put more into it. If you're like, I don't understand why he has me doing the treadmill, not the stairs. Well, okay, ask. I'll explain to you my philosophy. I have a philosophy for everything. That's part of the way my brain works. I have to understand everything. That's why I went back to school. That's why I spend time with, Lane and Brett Contreras and, Brad Schoenfeld. And I have to know why something works or doesn't work. I always wanted to understand why when I would increase my clients' food, their weight would start dropping. I had to understand that. So I reached out to Dr. Joe. What's happening here? And so when you start to understand that, it helps you. I had a girl today check in for peak week. We do a daily check-in. Monday, she checks in. Coach, I'm up 1.5 pounds from Friday. I did double cardio and I did, because we're pushing her to get leaner. I don't understand it. The scale is messing with me. And I explained to her what was happening. And she was like, oh, okay, cool. It's inflammation, it's digestion, it's all these things. Your body is inflamed, but you're also leaner. So 2 things can be true. You can weigh more and be leaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowledge is definitely power, and especially towards the end of prep when people's brains are just not functioning properly, to have like a educated coach in their corner who stays on top of the literature and everything.
I got
is
somebody that I'm checking
helpful.
in with at the end of my preps. I'm like, hey, am I seeing this right? I want to be leaner here, but am I, like I'm because you become a terrible self-coach at the end of prep. The only person I've known to really do it successfully was Brian Whitaker, but he would treat himself like a client. He would take pictures and videos and look at them of himself and not get emotional. That's very hard to do.
You should kind of chop off the head or something.
I did
hard.
that once. So I had a coach that worked for me. And she was very critical of her physique and very critical of herself, very negative, a lot of self-negative talk. And I got fed up with it once when she checked in with me. I took her picture, I chopped her head off, I sent it to her, and I said, I want you to open this picture and I want you to look at it. And this is a new client that's reaching out to you for coaching, and tell me what your assessment would be of this physique. I didn't hear from her for 2 days. And she called me and she's like, I couldn't handle that. She's like, I have never looked at myself that way. She's like, I actually was like, oh, wow, this person has a good physique. She was struggling with dysmorphia of herself. But when I took her head off and sent her the picture, she was like, oh, wait a minute, why am I being like this? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you got time for one more question? I know we had.
Let's do it.
So something I'm interested in, I'm sure you experience this all the time, is judges' feedback. Is that something you highly value? Does it depend? How do you deal with it sometimes if maybe it contradicts something you're
Yeah,
seeing with your own client?
it definitely depends because it comes down to the judge. So at a judge's table, you're going to have 7 judges. Not all those judges are there to be judges. Some of those judges are there to hold a place just the way it is. The sport, especially the league that I, focus on, NPC, IFBB, they have a lot of judges that have been in the organization for 30 years and they are the best in the world. Um, but they also drive the show. When you put somebody in center as a head judge, that's a signal to all the other judges who the best is. So why would I want the feedback from somebody at the end of the table that's going to tell my client like, oh, I want you leaner, when the head judge just said, don't get any leaner. So I value the feedback that's going to get me the result for the client. So getting feedback after a show, yes, but take it with a grain of salt and make sure that the person that you're taking the most valuable information from is the one that's going to be in charge of judging. Yeah.
It makes me think of, there's a judging criteria, but then you have to look at the physiques that are being rewarded, and they don't
Yeah.
always align perfectly. And what we care about is the outcome. So what
Yeah.
physiques are being rewarded, and so maybe moving more towards that than even a criteria at times. So
Listen, judging is a thankless job. It's very hard. And the people that judge the most are usually the people that are deciding the standards in the organization. So like the head judges are usually the ones that know what the standard is. So I like to put my clients in those shows. I have a client that I just got off the phone with her. We want to turn pro. I said, I want to do this show to get in front of this show to get in front of this judge. And when we go to nationals, both head judges will have seen you. We'll take that feedback. We'll give them what they want. If you're the best that day, you'll win. But if, let's just say I go to a local show with no judges that are on the national panel and they win the overall, and that judge is like, oh, you need to be a little bit leaner. And then we go to nationals and we come in a little leaner and they're like, oh, sorry, you were too lean. So it's a strategy, but it's also, you don't want to waste people's time and energy. And this is where coaching, being at the shows, is critical for coaches. Critical. Whenever people ask me like, oh, what makes you a good coach? I go, going to all the shows, getting my ass kicked for years and being sick of it. Yeah.
do you think that's particularly important in the female classes because they're not as distinct sometimes as like men's bodybuilding and men's physique?
Yeah, there's a lot more nuance to the bikini and the fit model division than there is to like, the figure and classic physique and bodybuilding. Those divisions are, come in as lean as you can and as muscular as you can, but you can't do that in bikini and you can't do that in fit model. So you have to pay attention to, I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago. We talked about what are the non-negotiables for this new division. What can you not do? And so that's something that I'm learning this year as I'm going to shows. I had a girl this year go to a show. I thought she might get last place because we've never done fit model. She was up 6 or 7 pounds from her bikini weight. She won the whole show. She won the overall.
Wow.
And she beat 4 or 5 girls that had just won overalls. And I was like, man, I've got a lot to learn about this division, because I was nervous that she was even doing the show and here she is winning it. So, and we went to nationals and she got second, missing her pro card by a spot. And the feedback was, we want you a little bit leaner. When the first judge, who was not there, told us, don't come in any leaner. So, you got to learn the cadence of the judges that are giving you, that are awarding at the local, regional, national, pro, Olympia level.
I guess sometimes it can be tough too because it depends who turns up on the day. So if they have like 6 competitors and 5 of them are to a certain standard and 1 is slightly off, like it can make it a bit.
That shouldn't matter. When I talk to the really good judges, that shouldn't matter. But I see it all the time. If there's one girl that stands out like a sore thumb, she's really muscular and hard, and everyone else looks like they've just started competing, she might get docked for being too muscular and hard. Whereas if that girl was at nationals, she might turn pro.
Yeah.
And I've even had a girl get like 3rd or 4th at a show, and the judge told them, well, you were just too hard. You need to go to nationals, which makes no goddamn sense. No. And when I talk to the head judges at nationals, they're like, who was the judge? Tell me. We need to fix this. So like, it's, like I said, judging is hard. And, I love the judges, especially the ones that stay and talk after, because it helps me understand psychologically what they want from someone. So I know if I've got someone doing a show in front of Steve, Sandy, Tyler, Bill, I have little things in my brain from the last 15 years of talking to them of like what they're looking at, what's more, what they're going to prefer.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you so much for your time. I thought this
Always
is a great
love it.
discussion, and I love diving into this specific topic. I think it's not spoken about enough. And like I said, you're the person that comes to mind when I think of a fantastic coach who really cares about their clients. So thank you so much for your time. If people want to keep up to date with everything you're doing, obviously we mentioned the Pro Physique Studio podcast, which I'll make sure is linked. Is there anywhere else they should head?
I mean, YouTube, everything's under my name, Paul Ravella. There's no other Ravellas. So, like, if you type in my last name, I'm going to come up. But yeah, I do a lot of stuff on YouTube. I try to keep them on Instagram. I'm trying to do a TikTok. I'm trying to do more YouTube shorts. Those seem to be doing well now. So I'm trying to pay attention. But it's as a full-time coach, just find me at a bodybuilding show, man.
Lovely. Love it, Paul. Thank you so
Thanks,
much for
Steve.
your time. Thank
Always
you
a
guys for
pleasure, man.
listening.